The Caretaker is, amongst many other things, a study in power, in which three men, Davies, Aston and his brother Mick, negotiate for tactical advantage. But what is extraordinary is that you can trace the evolution of Harold Pinter's script from stage to screen. The Caretaker began, of course, as a stage play written in 1959, and a first draft of that survives in the Pinter archive. It's fairly close to the finished version, but you find a number of fascinating variations. For instance, you discover in Pinter's own inimitable handwriting a comic riff between Aston and Davies about the various types of saw that Aston could use to build his garden shed. Exactly the kind of dialogue that Pinter might well have written for one of his early review sketches, but drastically reduced in the finished play. In the draft stage script, reference is also made to a girl who lives along the landing and who shares the lavatory with the tenant of the flat, initially referred to as Johnson rather than Aston. At one point, the girl, called Ruby, even enters the flat and discovers Davies in bed. But a line through the script shows that Pinter clearly felt that this would spoil the hermetic all-male atmosphere of his play. The draft also shows how Pinter not only cuts and edits, but also makes last-minute additions to the script. One of the most famous lines in the play is Aston's inquiry to Davies, "Where were you born then?" which gets the response, "What do you mean?" As Penelope Gilliatt pointed out in her review of the film, the stinking, obsequious old man replies like this because he thinks the brother who's given him a bed in the lumber room is trying obscurely to get at him. You can see how Pinter has written out that crucial exchange in his own hand. In turning the highly successful play into a film, Pinter adopts the same process of both adding and taking away. After an establishing opening shot showing Mick sitting outside the house in his van smoking a cigarette, Pinter originally inserted a 12-minute scene in an all-night cafe. This was intended to set up the character of Davies and show how he got into a row with a Scotsman, Brown, and was kicked out of the cafe for refusing to take out a bucket. But the scene also includes desultory comic chat between the cafe's lonely late-night inhabitants. And it rather touchingly shows Aston intervening to protect Davies against assault by the fiery Scotsman. It's vintage Pinter, but in the end both he and the film's producer, Michael Burkitt, spontaneously agreed that it should go. But the film script also shows the way other additions lend the story a richer texture and give it a much greater sense of realism. For instance, there's a marvellous exterior scene in the garden where Aston measures up planks for the shed that he will never build, and where he and his brother, Mick, look down in silence at a pond while Davies watches them from a window above. Pinter once told me that was one of his favourite shots in the entire film. And what it clearly establishes is the familial bond between the two brothers and Davies's permanent sense of exclusion. Another characteristic addition in the film script shows Mick offering Davies a ride in his van, ostensibly to Sidcup. In fact, it's simply his way of exposing the hollowness of Davies's pipe dream, since all he does is drive him round in a circle.
Sitting comfortably, are you? Where are you going? I'm going to Sidcup. No, sorry, can't do it. The road will be up on the A222. That will mean doubling back on the B2210. It's all one way down there, you see, and we haven't got enough headroom for the humpback bridge, so we'll have to skip it. Hey, come up and have a drink at my place sometime. Listen to some Tchaikovsky. Ta-da. See ya.
It's interesting that Pinter adds in handwriting Mick's last-minute payoff line. Come up and have a drink at my place sometime. Listen to some Tchaikovsky. Now, obviously the line is intended to subvert Davis, but it also reminds us that Mick, like all the characters, has his own pipe dreams and delusions about gracious living. Pinter himself has said that opening out the action for the film gave him the chance to do things that he hadn't been able to do on stage. In the play, said Pinter, when people were confronted with just a set, a room and a door, they often assumed it was all taking place in limbo, in a vacuum, and the world outside hardly existed. In the film, however, Pinter retains the power battle between the characters, while exploiting the advantages of a realistic setting. Davies's pathetic attempt, for instance, to undermine Aston by enlisting Mick's support is spread over a variety of different locations. At one point, in a scene cut from the finished film, but surviving in script form, Davies whinges on about his need for a clock, and we see him following Mick through the streets like some nagging terrier. The exterior setting also gives the lines extra urgency, since Davies is rattling on about how he has to go out onto the streets in order to tell the time. In the original script, Pinter even takes Mick and Davies into a pub, where Davies continues his litany of complaints over a half a mile. But while the film script shows Pinter opening out the action, it also demonstrates his willingness to pare down his dialogue, often quite ruthlessly, to meet the demands of the cinema. He pastes up whole pages from the French's acting edition of the play, and then cuts away the surplus fat. There's a classic example in the scene where Mick first encounters Davies and verbally intimidates him in a speech beginning, "You remind me of my uncle's brother." It's a virtuosic piece of writing, but Pinter chops out a lot of the detail, such as the supposed uncle going in number 4 for Beckenham reserves. It works in the theatre, but in the cinema Mick's stranglehold over the old man can be conveyed that much more quickly. It's also a reminder of how early Pinter learned the art of economy in film writing. Once the script was finished, the next challenge was to raise the money to film it. Michael Burkitt, the producer, has left a wonderfully detailed 14-page account of the difficulties that he and his colleagues went through. He came up with an initial budget of £40,000. A big American company was prepared to put up the bulk of the money. On that basis, a house in Hackney was rented for shooting. A crew was engaged with Nicholas Rogue as cameraman. Clive Donner, the director, began a 3-week rehearsal process. And then, as so often happens in movies, the American money fell through. What was to be done? Burkitt slashed the budget to £30,000. The 6 members of Caretaker Films, Pinter, Burkitt, Donner and the 3 actors, drew up a list of friends who might provide individual finance. The response was overwhelming. Peter Hall and Leslie Caron, the film producer Harry Saltzman, Noel Coward, Peter Sellers, Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor all offered to invest in the film. Others, such as Vivian Leigh, Leonard Bernstein and Lord Harwood, were disappointed to find that the subscription list had to be closed. But at least shooting could now begin. Shooting itself was difficult. Much of it took place in a cramped attic which had room only for the actors, the director, the cameraman, camera operator, boom operator and continuity girl. What really took up space was the junk that Aston had accumulated over the years, as the detailed props list, including 3 breakable Buddhas, shows. And even if the costume budget wasn't lavish, the requirements were absolutely specific. As a note to the costumiers signed by Harold Pinter, detailing such things as a velvet smoking jacket indicates. The film was shot in a highly restricted space, but one advantage of the cramped location was that the script could be shot in strict continuity order, which is almost unheard of in cinema. Visitors to the set were also impressed by the crew's light-footed efficiency. Even Noel Coward, used to slightly more luxurious conditions, made the trek from the Savoy Hotel to the Hackney location. Journalists also came out to report on the location filming. Irving Wardle wrote a piece in The Observer graphically describing the cramped conditions. Ian Wright followed this up with a similar article in The Guardian. Bill Brandt did a marvellous location photograph. But what made shooting even more difficult was that the winter of 1962-63 was one of the worst in living memory. This meant there had to be a highly organised shooting schedule with careful choice of days for location shots. In the end, the Arctic conditions worked to the film's benefit. Not only was the house authentically cold, but in the exterior scenes you can actually see the steam on people's breath. You also see the carpet of snow underfoot, which, as Burkitt reveals, became a dirty but brittle crust, adding to the sense of bleakness. At one point, Donald Pleasance's Davis is even seen on the streets begging for money during a snowstorm.
Excuse me, Governor, have you... I might get down to Wembley later on in the day.
Yes?
Yes, there's a calf down there, see? I might be able to get fixed up. I know there's a bit short-handed. There might be in need of a bit of staff.
Editing the film was a lengthy process, and something to which all 6 members of Caretaker Films made their contribution.
Right.
An effects score was also created using natural sounds, such as creaks, door slams and traffic, which occur within the film. Eventually, a print was made and shown to the film's backers at a private showing. Clive Donner was anxious that influential people in the film world were given an early viewing of the movie. Intriguingly, there's a letter from Dilys Powell, then the film critic of the Sunday Times, responding to an invitation to see it. And when the film was selected as the official British entry for the 1963 Berlin Film Festival, where it won the Silver Bear Award, letters of support and congratulation flooded in. There's a telegram from Clive Donner's colleague, Jack Clayton, and more formal congratulatory letters from the BFI, Anglo Amalgamated Film Distributors, and British Lion, as well as letters from Clive Donner's own friends and associates, including the art critic David Sylvester. One letter rather cheerily says, "I hope you are able to buy that semi-detached in Sid cup on which you and the boys have set your heart." But although the film won the Silver Bear in Berlin and was much admired, it had to wait some time for distribution, as a letter from Michael Burkitt indicates. It wasn't actually released until 1964, where it was first shown in America under the title of The Guest. Perhaps it was felt Americans wouldn't actually know what a caretaker was. The all-important New York Times liked the film very much and accompanied the review with a background piece. The New York Herald Tribune was notably less enthusiastic, but later reviews in the Washington Post and Star were more encouraging. In Britain, the film came out in March, where it was press shown at the Academy Cinema in Oxford Street. A line drawing of Donald Pleasance as Davis was also used to promote the film, an example of the care that was lavished on a movie that its makers and producers regarded as something special. And when the film was shown to the national critics, it was glowingly received. The most perceptive review of all came from Penelope Gilliatt in The Observer, who picked out the way Pinter's characters respond not to the meaning of a speech, but to what they can guess about motives. She also wrote, "A lot of films made from stage sources deserve the ritual snobbish abuse about photographed plays, but I hope The Caretaker doesn't come in for it. Every line in it involved rather delicate decisions of filmmaking, and Clive Donner and the cameraman have taken them impeccably." The film was also praised at the Skies on that well-known BBC institution, The Critics, at that time the most parodied programme on radio, but also one that generated highly intelligent discussion. The film of The Caretaker was a great critical success. While retaining the structure and themes of the original play, it also improves on it. As we have seen, Pinter pared down the dialogue. At the same time, he used the camera to lend the action a social context, and to remind us that the three characters exist not only in the room, but also in the harsh, bleak, unforgiving outside world. You can see them, if you so choose, as God the Father, Son and Holy Ghost, or ego, superego and id. But the film establishes that they are first and foremost real people in a real situation. Given the film's limited distribution, I suspect that it never reached its potential audience in 1964. Now, with the video release, viewers will be able to enjoy not just the film itself, but also appreciate the extent to which it was a genuine labour of love.